Photoshop photo editing. Adobe Photoshop is computer editing software for photographs and exists in versions for Apple Macintosh and Windows computers. Photoshop can edit a photo to create an image with the same dimensions as a frame of high definition or HD video. Photoshop can then export that image in a format .psd that can be imported by video editing software and then be incorporated into a movie presentation. Photoshop color correction. Photoshop can also perform another task that is particularly helpful in editing underwater photos. Water blocks the transmission of colors to differing degrees based on the wavelength of the color or light, such that a photograph taken underwater tends to have an unnatural blue tint to it. Photoshop has tools that can color correct imbalances created by underwater photography. Image dimensions. There are differences in the dimensions of a photographic versus a video image. A typical photographic image of 4,000 by 3,000 pixels, or 12 megapixels, has a width-to-height ratio of 1.33. A high-definition or HD video frame of 1920 by 1080 pixels, only 2 megapixels, has a width-to-height ratio of 1.78. There's more content in a photographic image than in an HD video frame, and the width-to-height ratios are dissimilar. Cropping a photo to video frame dimensions. Photoshop has a crop tool that can be used in two different ways to edit a photo to the dimensions of an HD video frame or 1920 by 1080. One method employs cropping using a fixed ratio of 1.78, which is 1920 divided by 1080. The other method employs cropping using the fixed size of 1920 by 1080 pixels. Cropping using a fixed ratio. In this approach, the crop tool is set to a ratio of 1.78, which is 1920 divided by 1080. The crop box is then maneuvered over the image and stretched or shrunk to find a desired portion of the image for export and use as a video frame. Using this method, the cropped image will in all likelihood not be exactly 1920 by 1080. Choose image size and set the width to 1920. The height should automatically change to 1080. Export the 1920 by 1080 image in .psd format. Cropping using a fixed size. The crop tool is set to a size of 1920 by 1080 pixels, the frame size for HD video. Then adjust image size so that the minimum width is 1920 pixels. Then return to the image and move the crop box up and down over the image to decide how much of the top and how much of the bottom part of the image must be cropped to 1080 pixels. Cropping then produces a 1920 by 1080 image equivalent in size to a single HD frame. Export the 1920 by 1080 image in .psd format. Additional comments on image size. In some cases, using a fixed size cropping method, resizing the image may not be necessary. For example, after setting the crop tool to 1920 by 1080, the desired portion of the image may fit within the crop box, and a simple crop is all that is needed. It is worth noting that video editing programs can also perform cropping after importing still images that are larger than 1920 by 1080 pixels. More on this later in Final Cut Pro features.